there are actual tangible steps that you can be taking in order to find and develop your illustration style. And I'm going to teach you how. Welcome to the Self-Taught Illustrator. My name's Natasha, aka @Natashko, and I'm here to prove that you do not need a formal training or background in art to make it as an illustrator. So listen up and get ready to be inspired, encouraged, and uplifted in your illustration journey. Hello, and welcome back to what is hopefully the first of a fresh batch of new episodes. I'm so pumped to be kicking 2025 off with one of my all-time favorite topics, finding your illustration style. This is a topic that I've spoken about before in previous episodes, but I wanted to take the time to create a way more comprehensive and in-depth look into style with concrete examples and reflections on my own work to actually help give you some guidance and direction when it comes to finding and developing your own style. And before I continue, I also want to jump in here for a sec and give credit where credit is due. On that fateful day when I woke up and decided that I was going to find my style by any means necessary, I did so much research, and there were a few brilliant creatives and thinkers whose teachings and philosophies on style I really resonated with. Lisa Congdon, Fran Nerd, Meg Lewis, Chris Do, Elizabeth Gilbert, Ira Glass, and Austin Kleon all really impacted and influence the way that I think about the topic of personal style in a really meaningful way. All right, now let's get back to it. So, I'm guessing that you instinctively already know how important it is to find an illustration style. Perhaps you're trying to find yours. Maybe you have a style, but you're not sure if it feels completely true or unique to who you are. Wherever you're at on your journey, I know that you're going to get a whole lot from this episode. And for those of you who are perhaps rolling your eyes and aren't necessarily convinced that a style is needed or important, let me try and convince you otherwise. Having a unique personal style is important because it makes your work recognizable. In this industry, a recognizable style helps people remember and identify your work instantly. Think Dr. Seuss or Mary Blair. Their work is so immediately recognizable, you don't even need to see the actual signature on their work to know it's them. Next, it attracts your ideal audience and clients. Your style signals to people what kind of work you do, and for that matter, what kind of work you want to do. So for example, a childlike, colorful, illustrative style is going to make your work a lot more attractive to children's book publishers. Or if you have a sleek, modern style, maybe you might be better suited to working for branding clients, for example. Next, a personal style helps you build up your confidence and artistic voice. When you stop replicating and copying other styles, your work becomes a lot more meaningful and fulfilling. And here is what I think is the most important reason. Professional illustrators fall into two camps: the production illustrator and the artist illustrator. And the thing that separates them is the presence of a style. Let me spell it out. A production illustrator is known as a generalist, and they usually have a portfolio full of work with no real stylistic through line. They may get steady work because they're able to produce and adapt to any style that a client might ask them to create, but the downside of being a production illustrator is that they are often just considered a pair of hands, hired to copy or recreate different styles from other artists. If they try and raise their rates, clients don't really have any reason to stick with them, and they can always just find another production illustrator who's willing to do the same work for less money. On the other hand, an artist illustrator has a signature style that elevates them to the position of creative partner and co-creator in client projects. And these kinds of illustrators often have much higher rates. Instead of being faceless in their work, the artist illustrator is often front and center, and brands, customers, and clients pay a premium in order to be associated with them. Some examples of these kinds of collaborations are Olympia Zignoli and Barilla, James Jean and Prada, or Malika Favre and Penguin Books. The truth is that this caliber of recognition and respect, like it or not, is only awarded to artist illustrators, people who have a strong sense of personal style. So hopefully that just reinforces how crucial a personal illustration style is. But of course, I know that this is all easier said than done. A lot of beginner illustrators that I teach say that finding a style is one of the hardest things they're facing in their practice. And so that's why I love teaching on this topic. And it's why I'm creating this very episode you're listening to right now. In this episode, I'm going to kick things off by addressing some big myths. I'm then going to introduce you to my formula for defining your own style. And I'm actually going to walk you through each step of the formula because I want you to walk away from this episode equipped with the tools that you need to actually go out and develop your style on your own. Okay, so let's get into it. When I first start working with new students who want to find and develop a personal style, I find that first and foremost, there needs to be a huge mindset shift that happens before we even start thinking about diving into their style. There are 3 main myths that I consistently find keep people stuck and unable to effectively go on that journey of discovering their style. And apologies in advance to those of you who have heard this before, but I know that there are at least a few of you out there who need to hear this. So the first of those myths is you need 10,000 hours of practice to truly master something. There is this overwhelming belief that all you need is practice. You need to put in your 10,000 hours and you will be pro at anything you want. In some cases, yes, I can see that being true. Practice is important, especially when it is strategic, specific, and measurable, but let's not get into that too deeply right now because the topic of how to practice is its own whole other episode. The reason why this is a myth and why it can be so damaging is because for some, they look at that huge number, that 10,000 hours, and get extremely daunted. They think to themselves, I don't have a spare 10,000 hours. I have a full-time job. I'm a student. I'm a parent. I'm too old. I'm too this. I'm that. And so it stops some people from even going on that journey of finding their personal illustration style for themselves in the first place. I believe that the person who invented the 10,000 hour rule wasn't really thinking about different ranges of creative pursuits that people might be trying to undertake. On one hand, yes, I do recognize that putting in a ton of hours into one very specific action is going to make you a lot better. 10,000 hours spent solving Rubik's Cubes or practicing gymnastics, for example, is of course going to help you excel. But these are all examples of objective pursuits. They have singular goals where the only aim is to perform at the highest standard. So solving that Rubik's Cube as quickly as possible or getting a perfect score out of 10 at a gymnastics competition. When it comes to art, however, this is where things start getting a little more nuanced. Art is extremely subjective, and there is no one true right or perfect way to execute art. So to bring it back to illustration, I constantly hear people saying that they need to get better at or master sketching, anatomy, learning how to draw faces properly. They need to learn the ins and outs of Photoshop, Illustrator, or whatever software they saw their favorite illustrator use. They feel like they need to put in the hours to get good before they can even think about what their style is or could be. This is where the first huge mindset shift needs to happen. Instead of thinking that you need to put all of these hours into mastering illustration before finding your style, flip that on its head, because even if your skills aren't exactly where you want them to be, and trust me, you will never feel like they are, you can go on that journey to uncover your personal style and then let that inform how you practice and where you focus all of your energy. Understanding the kind of style that is already innate to who you are as a person and as an illustrator, as well as how you'd like that style to grow, evolve, and develop, is actually going to inform the kinds of practice that you should be doing. I mean, perhaps when you go on that journey of finding your style, you might learn that you would be better suited to work in a specific software or medium. And then once you've figured that out, you can then put in the hours to become the absolute best at this very specific style or way of drawing Does that make sense? And I don't think that's going to take you anywhere near 10,000 hours. Yes, the longer that you create art in this style, the better you will get, the more it will grow, the more it will develop. But that's all just to say, throw that 10,000 hour mindset away. Find your style and then go from there. Alrighty, and now for that second myth. Stay in your lane and keep your blinders on. When you're actually on that journey of finding your style, you may hear the advice that it's good to just focus on what you're doing and not look at anyone else's art. And although I totally understand the sentiment, because of course we don't want to be comparing ourselves and we don't want to be too influenced by others. But when it comes to your style, it's so important to know and recognize that your style is a product of your influences, the things that you like, that you're drawn to. No art exists in a white box. I think Austin Kleon said it best in his book, Steal Like an Artist, where he said, every idea is a mashup or remix of one or more previous ideas. And so, instead of trying to ignore the outside world, why not draw from our inspirations and intentionally use them to help us build our own personal style? And of course, this is not your license to go out and copy your favorite illustrator's work. Of course not. In this very episode you're listening to right now, I'm going to teach you how to properly and ethically draw from your well of inspiration while still staying true to yourself and being 100% unique. Now, that leads me to the third and final myth. You don't find your personal style finds you. And this one can actually be a super controversial one. I have heard so many artists and illustrators say this, and although yes, of course, it could be said that if you spend years and years creating aimlessly, so to speak, some sort of style will inevitably emerge. However, when I was first getting started, I really didn't want to just wait around and just wait for it to happen. I always knew the importance of having a personal style and I just wanted one ASAP. So I am living proof that you can take actionable and tangible steps to find your style, and I'm going to outline them for you in this episode here. I'm going to walk you through all the steps that I took to uncover and develop my own style in the hopes that it's going to help you find yours. So let's get into it. I want to introduce you to a framework that I created. Imagine a pyramid, and at the very base you have uncovering your aesthetics. Of course, I'm going to explain this in a bit more detail in a moment, but just know that this base foundational component to finding your style is all about digging into what makes you, you. After all, your style is meant to be super personal and unique, so having it revolve around you is absolutely key. After uncovering your aesthetics, in the middle section of the pyramid, we have unpacking your taste. Remember before when I was talking about finding inspiration in art? Well, that's what this section is all about. By looking at different illustration styles from history and the present, as well as some of the work of your favorite artists and illustrators, you will be able to start to hone in on your own style. And then we have the very top of the pyramid. We have crafting your style. This is where we put everything back together and get stuck into the process of actually defining and solidifying what your style is. We do that by creating a prototype. And of course, I'll explain what that is in a moment, so hold tight. Alrighty, so now that you have a general idea of the formula, let's actually dive in. I'm going to walk you through each of these stages in a lot more detail. As you listen to this episode, you can actually follow along and work through some of the steps as I explain them, or if you like, sit back and listen, get inspired, take notes, and you can come back to this episode when you're ready to actually put pen to paper. So, the very first foundational step, uncovering your aesthetics. So again, this is all about getting to the root of who you are, not only as an artist, but also as a person. There are 4 main steps to uncovering your aesthetics, and I'm going to walk you through each one of them one by one. The very first step is defining your characteristics. Just to put it simply, you want to pinpoint a couple of characteristics that feel super unique to who you are at your core. Usually these aren't art or illustration related at all. For some of you, those are going to be things that are super obvious and easy to list, and for some, it may take a little more soul searching and reflection to uncover them, and you might actually find that you might want to ask a friend or family member to help you with this, because sometimes an outsider perspective can be super helpful. So when you're ready, go ahead and write down around 3 to 4 of those defining characteristics. To give you an example of what this might look like, I'm going to walk you through my own defining characteristics. So here they are. 1, I like my alone time. 2, having my space clean and fresh is the best feeling. 3, I highly value my freedom and independence. And 4, I am an old soul at heart. Okay, now once we have those listed, we now want to go ahead and curate visuals for each of these characteristics. You just want to create a mood board that perfectly captures the essence or the vibe of each of your defining characteristics. So 1 mood board per characteristic. Be extremely intentional with every image that you select. You want to make sure that every single visual you choose is going to strongly resonate with you. I suggest using Pinterest for this because I feel like it's just so good at serving you up related images that fit within the same vibe or feeling. So again, using myself as an example, my first defining characteristic was I like my alone time. And for me, that looks like moody weather, cozy vibes, cafes, bookstores. And so I created a mood board that perfectly embodies what I'm thinking and feeling when I say I like my alone time. For someone else, it might mean chilling on a remote island, on a hammock, under a palm tree. But my mood board perfectly communicates what it means to me. And you want to do that exact same with each of your defining characteristics, creating a super visually compelling mood board that really captures the essence of each. Okay, once you're done and you have 3 to 5 of these mood boards, it's now time to take a step back and really analyze them to find the recurring themes in each. And really take your time with this. Look at color, detail, texture, any repeating elements that you see. So again, using myself as an example, when I look at I like my alone time mood board, I'm seeing fog and clouds, muted, moody colors, a stark contrast between cold and warm, fuzzy, warm, comfortable textures, windows, greens, pops of warmth. While you're doing this exercise, don't try to censor yourself just yet. I don't want you to think like, oh, I don't like the idea of muted, moody colors in my style, for example. For now, just get everything on paper and the curation and filtering of all of this will come later. So I know that you're starting to get a good idea for how you might start to approach this creative exercise. So do the same for the rest of your mood boards, taking note of all those recurring themes that you're seeing. And now I'm so excited for this part. Drawing from the work that we've done so far, we're going to start our style manifesto. Think of your style manifesto as this sort of foundational declaration of what you want your style to be. I created mine years ago and I still open it up every now and then just to make sure I'm staying true to my core style principles. So essentially, what I want you to do is reflect on all of your recurring themes from your mood boards that you created, and in your style manifesto, jot down the ones you feel really excited about. For the ones you're not too sure about, you can list them down as just maybes. And for those that you are sure you definitely don't want to be included in your style, just go ahead and discard them. They don't need to make it into your manifesto. So once you're done, you should have a list of different stylistic elements that you'd be excited to include in your illustration style. And this is just the beginning. We are going to continue to add and develop our style manifesto, so get excited for that. So that brings us to the end of uncovering your aesthetics. If you think back to the pyramid I talked about before, now I'm going to talk about the next phase, and that is unpacking your taste. Within this phase, we have 3 steps: an art and illustration audit, looking to your heroes, and lastly, this will sound familiar, but we're going to add everything into our style manifesto. So let's dig in. Remember at the beginning of this episode when I was talking about how important it is to be aware of your inspirations and what you're drawn to without falling into the trap of copying? Well, I'm going to walk you through how you can ethically draw from inspiration to help define your own style. First things first, we need to do an art and illustration style audit. And this is all about looking at different defined styles that exist out in the world. If you went to art school, chances are you would have been exposed to a range of different historical and contemporary art and illustration movements. But since I know that most of the people listening aren't in that boat, in this step, I want to stress that it is important to become a student and do a little bit of research into some of the different art and illustration styles that already exist out in the world. And listen, I have to interrupt myself again to stress that the aim of finding your style isn't to name or identify it. Yes, I am about to show you a range of styles that do have a specific label or name. And yes, you very well might choose to have your work fit in within one of these frameworks. But the real aim of finding your style, and what I'm trying to teach in this episode, is that a unique personal style is often a mix or combination of many different things. So it is more likely that your style won't have a tidy label or name that you can assign to it. The goal should be to have a style that is super strongly associated with just you. I hope that's clear. Okay, let's resume. The aim of this exercise, kind of in the same vein that we did before, is to study a wide range of styles and pull out the recurring themes and elements that we're seeing in each. There are countless different styles out there, and I can't cover them all, but I'm just going to name a few just as a starting off point. So let's take rubber hose, for example. If you're not familiar, the style is what you would see in early Mickey Mouse illustrations, Popeye, Betty Boop, that kind of vibe. In this style, some of the obvious recurring elements are the monochromatic color palette, the noodly rubber hose limbs with the gloves, and the Fleischer eyes, which are usually these vertical ovals with triangle cutouts. So the aim, as I mentioned, is to really walk through and study the different styles and movements and pull out those recurring themes for yourself. Some other styles you might want to look into include fashion, minimal flat, Disney, comic book, cutout, vintage children's book, Art Nouveau, Cubism, manga. The sky's the limit. The further you get with this, the more informed your own style will become. Okay, so once you feel like you've done a good amount of research and pulled out those recurring visual themes for each of the styles, go ahead and take note of all of the themes that you resonate with and feel like you might want to translate over into your own style. So for myself, after I went through this exercise with a range of different styles, I really found myself drawn to things like rubber hose limbs, hourglass forms, strong poses, fabrics, simplified shapes, strand strokes, simple facial features, flowers and natural elements. And so I just made a running list of those. Now, while we're at it, we can also do the exact same exercise, but instead look to your art and illustration heroes. Find work that you find yourself really drawn to and place all of that work on a board. And in the same way that we've done in previous exercises, and yes, you guessed it, you will go in and find all the recurring visual elements that you're seeing. So again, using myself as an example, when I did this exercise way back when, I found a range of inspiration, and upon reflecting on these, I found that I was super drawn to large hands and grainy textures. So I went ahead and added those to my running list. Okay, and now the final step, we are going to pull our style manifesto back up along with the list we just created and consolidate them neatly into the style manifesto. So I hope this is all making sense so far. By now, you should have a really solid style manifesto that you feel really excited about. Now for the third phase, the tip of that pyramid, we are now ready to go ahead and craft your illustration style. Essentially, what you want to do here is use your style manifesto to begin to give life to your actual illustration style. And this is a personal preference, but I always suggest that people start defining their style through a human character. And why is that? So, if you're looking to become an illustrator professionally, chances are that you will have to draw characters sooner or later. And the truth of the matter is that defining a character style is actually quite involved. There are so many variables and considerations that need to go into developing a character and illustration style. And that's why I always suggest starting with characters. Once you do this, everything else, so how you draw trees, plants, animals, whatever else, everything will just fall into place. And just another quick note on characters. When you're developing a character illustration style, you have one of two options. The first being is to go down the one character route. This is essentially when all the characters you draw are more or less the same character, maybe with slight variations. The other option is having a cast of characters. And what this looks like is a range of different characters that all fit with underneath the same stylistic umbrella, so to speak, but you still have a lot of variation when it comes to things like proportion, facial features, etc. So neither option is better than the other. It all really comes down to your personal taste and the kind of illustrations that you want to be creating. With that being said, when it comes to figuring out your illustration style, I always recommend starting with one character and really nailing it down. And then later down the road, you can create more variations and even go down the cast of characters route if you want. Okay, so let's get into it. I always recommend starting off with body proportions. When it comes to real life anatomical proportions, there are all these rules that come into play if we want to have a realistic illustrative style. And if that's you, there are so many resources and guides that exist out there. So take the time to study and get comfortable with the basics of anatomy. Now, if that's not you, good news. You don't really have to worry about the rules. And that's the beauty of illustration. You get to make up your own style. Body proportions can say so much about a character. And Disney is a great example of this. The way that they use proportions, shape, and form really impact our perception of any given character. And we can totally do the same in our own styles. Okay, so you might be thinking, all right, sounds good, but where do I start? Well, this is exactly why we created those style manifestos. So at this point, I want you to pull it back up and select the elements on your list that feel like they would be relevant to body proportions. So for me, that would be strong female forms, hourglass silhouettes, rubber hose limbs, and large hands. Okay, so once you have that list of elements for your body proportions front of mind, it's time to finally put pen to paper and start drawing. Now, of course, your body proportions list isn't going to do all the work for you. These are just some suggestions to help you along your way. You will also need to do a lot of experimentation and testing until you feel like you're getting to a point that you're happy with. All right, before I move on, I have to tell you, this is the point where we start moving into the danger zone. I have worked with so many students, and it's at this point that they start to lose steam. They say it's too hard and they weren't able to decide on their body proportions. And then when I ask to see their work, they only have one or two sketches that they tried to do. To truly do this exercise, you need pages and pages of tests and experiments. Honestly, at this point, quantity is better than quality. I want you to try out as many different proportions as you can. Try a character with a larger head, a smaller torso, larger hands, tiny feet, big feet. You get the gist. The reason why we want to create as many tests as we can without getting too tied up in perfection is that you'll start making unexpected discoveries. You might be like, hey, I really like the torso on this version and I like the head and the neck on this other version. What if I were to combine them? So that's all to say that yes, this part isn't a walk in the park, but by actually putting in the hard work to figure out this for yourself is going to catapult you to another level in your illustration practice and career. So give yourself all the time you need to really sit with this exercise. I personally like using a sketch program like Fresco on my iPad, but if you don't have an iPad, please don't let that get in your way. You can also use paper, pencil, and tracing paper to do this. So to make this easier for yourself, I'd recommend starting with a base reference image and just start to play around with manipulating the proportions and forms, keeping in mind the elements from your body proportions list. Do your best to incorporate these elements into your sketch, even if it feels a bit unnatural. We all have this default way of drawing, and our aim should really be to break out of this and try something new. And remember, this process should be fun. Feel free to get as crazy as you like with your tests. There are an unlimited amount of options and variations when it comes to drawing an illustrated character's body, so feel free to play. Once you feel like you're at a good place, you can also go ahead and test out your body proportions by placing it in different poses. This is going to help you understand how your character looks like from the side, the back, or even how the limbs act when they're folded or doing different gestures. Okay, so I hope that this is all making sense so far. This is gearing up to be a long episode, so hats off to you if you're still listening. The next step is to walk through that exact same process, but instead of body proportions, we want to focus on facial features. So by now, you know the drill. Look at your manifesto, pull out any of the elements that you feel like they could have some relevancy to facial features, and start experimenting. Again, take all the time you need. The facial features are so important when it comes to your overall style. Just know that there are so many different options available to you. And again, just take the time to churn out as many as you can until you feel like you're able to narrow in on the one that you like best. Once you've decided on your facial features, go ahead and try out different expressions. Depending on your style, these may be super subtle and minimal, or they might be really over the top and expressive. The main elements to tweak expression are the eyebrows, the mouth, and the eyes. And some of the additional elements, again, depending on how detailed and expressive you want to get, are things like wrinkles, face lines, tears, perspiration, blushing, and even dilated pupils. So keep those things in mind as you're fleshing out your expressions. Now, what you want to do is take your facial expressions and apply them to the body proportions you created earlier and see how they feel together. This is a great test. And if you feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect, like they're not really fitting well with each other, you can always tweak and refine things to make sure that everything as a whole is looking and feeling good to you. All right, by now you should have a nice solid base for your character. And the next step is to figure out some of those extra details like hair, hands, and feet. And you know the drill, look at your style manifesto and just go to town with experimenting. Getting to a point where you feel really happy with how all of the details look. If you ever find that there's nothing specific in your style manifesto for the thing that you're trying to figure out, so like let's say you have no guidance around hands, that's totally fine. All that it means is that you'll have to do a lot more experimentation and try out more variations to really test out and see what sticks. All right, so we're almost done. Now it's time to figure out some of those extra little details for ourselves. Things like color, shading, and texture, what medium, aka software, we should be using for our style. Some of the scene elements, so what are the things that go around our character? Each of these topics on their own could be their own episode, so please let me know if there's a specific one that you would like me to expand more on. But essentially, again, I want you to draw heavily from your style manifesto and just experiment. Once you feel like you're in a good place with all of those extra details, your big aim or goal is to create something called a character prototype. This is essentially a declaration of your character illustration style. It's like the benchmark that you will use to create your whole style around. So you want to make sure that you're really happy and excited about it. Be sure to include most, if not all, of the elements in your style manifesto. It's a good idea to have your character prototype annotated, so call out the different elements from your style manifesto. This one illustration is a culmination of everything that we've done to define our styles so far. And I know you might be nervous about creating a character prototype. Perhaps you feel like you don't want to feel confined or limited to it. But the beauty of it is that your style will evolve and grow as you do. It's for this reason that I like to redo my character prototype every couple of years. If you were to look at my prototypes across time, you would notice the same underlying stylistic principles, but I have definitely evolved as my skill and my taste has. And so will yours. Also, the aim of creating a prototype isn't to set a stringent set of rules for ourselves. For example, I don't add a window, clouds, and reflection to every single illustration I do. Of course not. But I try to stay true to the essence and the vibe of my prototype whenever I'm creating a new work. The question I always ask myself is, if this work were to be shown at an exhibition, at a museum, would this feel like all the same style and the same artist, or would people be confused and think they weren't part of the same collection? Okay, I know I have thrown an insane amount of information at you, but I truly hope that this is what you needed to really dive in and go on that journey of finding your illustration style. Now, if you're a self-taught illustrator, I would love to give you a shout out and highlight your illustration work in an upcoming episode. To be considered, leave a comment wherever you're listening, be it YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. Tell me why you love the Self-Taught Illustrator podcast, and be sure to include your handle or website somewhere in the comments so I can look you up. So that's it for now. Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Taught Illustrator Podcast, where I prove that you do not need a formal training or background in art to make it as an illustrator. I'm Natashko all over the web. That's Nataszko, and you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. I look forward to bringing you more illustration tips, tricks, and nuggets of wisdom. All right, until next time, bye for now.